and welcome everybody to today's video. In this video I wanted to talk about the top 5 mistakes beginner webtoon creators make. Now these will not necessarily be in order since sometimes these can be really varying in terms of importance according to someone's individual workflow, so please just keep that in mind. To be honest, these are all mistakes that I also made as a beginner, so absolutely no shame in any of this. I actually wish someone would have told me how to avoid these back in the day, so I hope that this will be helpful to all you beginner comic creators out there. For context, I have been a comic artist for nearly 7 years now. I'm by no means a professional, but I do take making comics fairly seriously, as it is my favorite hobby and I just love doing it so much. I recently finished releasing my latest comic, Rigor Mortis, and I'm currently working on 2 other comics I will be releasing next year. Ace of Thieves is one of them, which I will release next year September, and Flying School Reboot will get released next year March. It is also the comic you're seeing behind as the speed paint in the background. It's also very suitable for this video, since Flying School was actually my first ever comic, and I'm rebooting it next year, all improved. This just goes to show that even if your first try doesn't work out perfectly for the first time, because of the lack of experience or some other reasons, who's to say you are not allowed to try again with all the new knowledge that you have gained over the years? Which actually conveniently brings me to my first point. The number 1 mistake people make is not even trying. I know, it sounds really silly, don't worry, I'll get to actual genuine technical stuff, but for now I thought it would be important to mention this at the very least. Too often nowadays I see creative individuals all excited to make a comic yet too scared to do it. Most often it is due to them thinking their art skills are lacking or are not good enough. I actually always tell people to make comics anyway, because for me personally it actually helped me improve so much more because of the sheer variety of scenes and perspectives I had to draw and the amount of times I had to draw the same characters over and over. Not to mention, for my first ever comic, and actually a few after that as well, I drew the backgrounds by hand. And unsurprisingly, it boosted my progress by a lot. Consistency is key, as they say, and it is all the better when you make a comic out of it. And another important point to bring up here is not feeling like your art is good enough is a very common and unfortunate feeling that a lot of people have, but I am really sad to say it's just unfortunately a never-ending struggle as an artist. But you can only ever feel comfortable in doing a certain thing or type of art if you actually try and improve as you go. One does not simply gain skill by pondering about how good it would be to have such skill. And like I said, I personally am rebooting my first ever series because I feel like I have improved enough to make it work much better now. So I hope you too can find the courage to start a comic, because what you have to gain far outweighs what you have to lose by doing so. My second point is something that I'm extremely guilty of, that I unfortunately had to correct in a bit of an extreme way. It is poor time management. Time management can really make or break a project. You can have all the amazing ideas in the world, but if you don't make time to execute them, it will only ever stay as an idea. And that sounds very obvious, but all too often people fall into this trap. With my first comic, I am ashamed to admit, but the first episode was finished exactly on the first anniversary. After that, I picked up the pace a bit because it was truly a wake-up call, but I still wasn't great. In the end, 16 episodes took me 4 years. For context, that would take me about a month and a half now, with my current time management plan that I came up with for myself. Nevertheless, I learned a lot from this. I now release at least 1 webtoon every year. So far, they've mostly been short stories, but I'm now moving on to longer-term comics. I'm not sure I would recommend my schedule for other people though, because it's really just me forcing myself to work every day of the week in the first month of summer. I will get into this a little bit more later. I have a schedule that works for me and I began to like it over the years, even though it is torture by most people's standards, and I refined it a bit every time. But I mean, you can take a look at how a day looks when I'm in my comic maker mode. It's really not a good sight, I know. So I would actually encourage you guys to come up with a schedule that you think will work for you, because these things highly depend on your personal life and how much of it you are willing to sacrifice as well, even though that sounds a little sad. But either way, this ties in really well to my next point as well: poor story planning. Another one I'm guilty of course. What I mean by this is, when you just started writing, it can feel really confusing. So you end up really deviating from your original idea and making side stories that didn't really need to happen, or over detailing things that have nothing to do with the story, and it just ends up not giving what it's supposed to give. Believe me, been there, done that, it's rough. I personally came up with a pretty streamlined workflow to combat this. I normally come up with about 2 comics every year that I want to do eventually. Hence my yearly release schedule, my best chance at actually making everything I want to make. Also the reason why I hold myself on such a tight leash. I usually let my ideas simmer for about 2 to 3 years before I start working out the characters and their world setting properly. This usually starts in September. At around November and December, I already have the outline of the story from beginning to end. This is very important. This helps avoid weird side stories or getting into unnecessary arcs. This also helps coming up with twists better, also foreshadowing. I really recommend having a whole story outline at least, even if not the entire script. But I usually script out everything in about January. Then I make thumbnail sketches for every single page and every single episode until May. It really helps with the panels looking much nicer together. And in June, July, I get to working on the pages religiously, as I have said before. That's the workflow that works best for me. But actually for Flying School Reboot in particular, I had a hard time. Since I can't just do both Flying School and my yearly comic at the same time in the summer, I decided I would do it during the year. And I gotta say, it's killing me. My next point isn't as serious as the last 3, but another mistake I see a tiny bit too often is text and typesetting. I could talk about show don't tell here, but it's actually just about not info dumping, please. I hate reading 2 paragraphs worth of text in one single speech bubble. Spare my eyes and your hands. But actually, here I wanted to talk about the font itself. A lot of people don't know, but there is a standard font that most professionals use in webtoon, and it's called Wild Words CC. But at the very least, it's certainly the most similar that I could find. It's up on DaFont for free, please download it, it's amazing. The most similar default font that everybody has is Comic Sans, however. You can use it on all caps and it will look alright. The only time Comic Sans looks good is in, well, comics. But please, use Wild Words instead if you can. It's all caps by default. Actually, generally, all caps are not considered easier to read. But it is the most common comic font for some reason. So much so that even when you see comics with a different font or just not in all caps, it just doesn't look right. I made the mistake of using custom fonts once, amateurly made. I made it, actually, in particular. And it looked god-awful, so please, unless you're going for a very certain vibe, your best shot is still Wild Words CC. My last point isn't the most crucial or anything, and it's very specific to if you want to upload on webtoon in particular. Coloring. While sites like Tapas are okay with uniquely colored comics, something that nobody will tell you, or maybe some people will, but you should know about, is webtoon doesn't really like black and white comics. It just simply does not promote black and white webtoons. Like I said in the beginning, I too have made all these mistakes, so yes, this one as well. I once made a one-shot and I was really trying to emulate the Japanese manga screen tone style. I thought it would be fun. It did well despite not being pushed to the front page, but if you compare it to the numbers to my full-color webtoons that came after, it's very apparent. I guess it's just more worth it for them to promote full-color webtoons, which is interesting, but, you know, it's a business, I guess. By all means, if you want to try a unique style, go for it, but if you want to make it on webtoon, maybe avoid doing so. And with that, that's all the mistakes I could think of that really stood out for me. For anyone really struggling with making webcomics, I have great news for you. I am making a tutorial series based on all the years of experience that I have. I really want to make interesting and useful tutorials about things that I wish I would have known when I was just starting out. So if you have any topic or struggle in particular, please feel free to share it down below in the comments so I can address it in one of these videos. Other than all this, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you want to see art from me that doesn't make it into my videos, follow me on Instagram or Twitter at eres_vt. If you would like to read my webtoons, you can find my creator profile under eres.png. Furthermore, I stream on YouTube every weekend, mostly art, sometimes games, so come say hi when you have the time. That being said, I'll see you in the next video, but until then, bye bye!